Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sound Booth Theater Live. This is the Cold Reads to Jackson. Everybody Loves Large Chests, Volume 9. Sorry for being late. I'm just trying to stuff food in my face. Been working really late. Night. Not getting enough sleep. My bad. Not recharging the battery well enough. But, yeah, hope you guys are having a good morning. And I'm anxious to get started here, so I'll be right back. I'm going to dump this water, get new water, get my coffee, and I'll be good to go. So, yesterday we released. Let's see, what was it? A short story by Kyle Kieran. For those of you who don't know, Kyle Kieran is the man who wrote Shadeslinger. I'm trying to remember what the name of the series is. Shadowverse? Something? No, The Ripple System. The Ripple System. That was way off. Yeah, we released it. The narrator is Ryan Reed, this new guy who I just met not too long ago, who's really great. So, if you guys haven't tried it already, the Portal Books side quest short story anthology is pretty fun. Basically, just a bunch of short stories from people who write for Portal Books, and the Ripple System is one of Portal's titles, and it's done really well. The original was narrated by Travis Baldree, but it's free, so go pick it up. Check it out. I think, quite a bit of people, I think the Portal side quests anthology hadn't been getting a whole lot of attention until we dropped that one. So hopefully more people are checking out that anthology and finding out what we have to offer. One thing I really like about that series that we've been doing is we've been making covers for each short story, and each cover looks like an original NES cartridge, and we have like the label on it and everything. And then so all the actual author text, the title of the story are on the label of the NES cartridge, and then all the Sound Booth Theater stuff is on the outside of it. But I just thought that was a really fun, cheap, and easy way to make a bunch of new covers, because really all you have to do then is change the color of the background behind the cartridge and then the image on the label, which is much smaller than the image as a whole. But this is not a mullet, sir. It's all the same length. Yeah. So go check that out. And of course, we are here with Everybody Loves Large Chests, which means we're on the topic of Neven Iliev, which means you guys should go pick up The Stars Have Eyes, which is a 15 episode deep dive serial. We're gonna start calling them the cinematic audio serials. So get used to that. We're rebranding. Yeah, also did a whole bunch of testing of the new app yesterday. It's getting down to the wire. It's looking like we're gonna be testing it all the way up until it's time for our Halloween sale, and that's when we're actually gonna be releasing the app. Apps are I just don't understand them very well. And developing them is very difficult. Especially developing them from the standpoint of I don't know shit about them. It's like I'm really it's frustrating, but we're dealing with professionals who know what they're doing, and it's been a long hard road, but it's at least going to be ready for our Halloween sale. So be on the lookout for that, guys. It's going to be a much better experience than the app that we have available now. Let me go clean my glasses and then we can get started. Devtron says, people see an app and they think it's easy. What you see is just the top of a very large iceberg. That's correct. Oh, thanks for all the compliments on The Stars Have Eyes. Scraw, did you just start it? Or were you talking about something else? I'm imagining the "Hi, Jeff" in Donut's voice right now. I hope that was your intention. All right. Good. Thank you, Facebook user, for being on theme. Scraw, I'm so glad you're enjoying Stars Have Eyes. Please, anyone else who hasn't experienced yet, just go pick up that first episode. It's free. And, of course, you won't be able to stop there, but I'm just letting you know, if you don't like it, you can stop without having to invest a single penny. '60s breathy porn voice. You know, I don't know that I've ever seen '60s porn. Would it be like this? Is this the one that you're talking about? It sounds old. What I'm doing sounds like an old lady. But is it like this? I'm surprised. To me, that sounds more tasteful than what I imagine narrators usually. What I imagine narrators would go to, which is the Monty Python high voice. No, maybe being at a professional level, that's more rare. Maybe professional narrators have a little more sense than that. Then add a bad accent, and it's what I listened to the last day. Wow. Excuse me. Ooh. Excuse me. All right. Scraw, you just said that you're on episode 4. You don't want to, or you want to pace yourself. I'm just curious how you and everybody else feel about the serialization that we do. If that changes the way you listen. Most people, I think they're used to audiobooks. They're used to gobbling them up as soon as they can. I don't know that too many people try to ration that out. I wonder if the episodic nature of the deep dive / cinematic audio stuff we've been putting out hasn't created the incentive to eat it in smaller bites. Is sound effects and music slightly draining? Does it make for a denser listen? Does it make for or maybe not draining, but filling, right? Is it more substance? So do you feel more satisfied per listen minute? Ah, I see, Scraw. Thank you. Devtron says, for me, serial depends on the price and the length. Paying an Audible credit for 2 hours is a no-no. Yeah, of course. I mean, to be fair, on Audible, you can pay cash for something that's 2 hours, but it's still going to be like $6, you know? Frank Moore, you do prefer to binge. And do you binge the full cast sound effects and music stuff? Do you find that it's Scraw says, but there is some of that. It is more of a dense listen, but it feels like there is a lot more packed into those 20-minute parts. Frank Moore says, yeah, Frank Moore still binges the full cast sound effects and music stuff. Oh my god, I just fell into a eternal pit. Okay. Let's get rid of this. Okay, and we have Everybody Loves Large Chests open. We had that long-ass journal entry from the potential new hero of death. Why is that so slow? Come on now. There we go. I wonder if I need to empty my trash here. And of course it didn't show up where I wanted it. It never does. Where's my trash? God damn it. Alright, rename. Where are we at? We're at 1.4. Yeah, these last couple chapters have been pretty damn long. 1.4. Where are we at? We're at 40-something minutes for part 1, chapter 1. 30-something minutes for part 2, chapter 1. And then fucking 50-something minutes for part 1, chapter 1, part 3. Long-winded ones this installment. And where are we at? We're at page 56 of 409. A Tale of Nightmares. The door to the Happy Fox swung open as the door to the Happy Fox swung open as two middle-aged men made their way inside the pub. The door to the Happy Fox swung open as two middle-aged men made their way inside the pub. The place had a very traditional and rustic style, clearly a place for the everyman to drink away their problems. It was well lit and had a bard playing a cheerful tune on his lute in the corner, giving it a welcoming atmosphere. The newcomers exchanged greetings and joking jabs with the other regulars on their way to their usual table. They sat on the wooden benches on either side and were quite eager to unwind after a hard day's work. Okay, so Kurt. Okay, so this is a woman. I'm not sure how to cast her. Might just go with Annie. We'll go with Annie. Let's give her a Boston accent. I think she's a human.
Well, look what the goblin dragged in. Surprised you two can show your faces here after how you were behaving yesterday.
A smarmy brunette in a white and orange waitress outfit approached the two. Her words were a bit rude and her tone rather harsh, though that was just her strict personality talking. There wasn't any actual malice involved. And we'll do Justin on this one? We'll do Justin and Will for these two characters. You know me, Bernadette? The taller gentleman replied. I can't go a day without seeing your charming smile. I'd love for it to be the first thing I see every morning, if you catch my meaning. I can't go a day... Knock it off, Kurt, his companion complained. You're old enough to be her father. So, I hear some girls love being spanked by a big, strong daddy.
Do I need to get Bruno again?
Bernadette tilted her head towards the entrance, more specifically at the stone-faced dwarf leaning against the wall next to it. His job was mostly to look mean and discourage the patrons from acting up. One would think a dwarf lacked the necessary stature to be an effective bouncer at a human establishment, but his log-like arms and legs made it abundantly clear he was not one to mess with. Someone that thick was bound to have an absurd amount of strength and endurance. Yeesh, I was only kidding, Kurt said defensively. No need to get physical.
Your getting physical is the problem here, she said sternly. Just because you know the owner doesn't give you free rein to do as you please. Keep your hands to yourself, or Bruno will break them so bad you'll have to have Hans wipe your ass.
Ugh, thanks for that mental image, the other man groaned. Really does wonders for my appetite.
Good, because I'm still waiting on your order.
The black-haired duo each ordered a glass of frostbite brandy along with a large platter of assorted cheeses, fruits, and meats. The waitress took their order and went to attend to the other patrons, leaving the pair to talk amongst themselves. Hee Bernadette was splendidly harsh today, too, Kurt said jokingly. Hans let out a tired sigh. I don't get why you keep talking to her like that. You were always a bit of a womanizer, but you've been going at it a lot more lately. What gives? I figure if Alex can chase after some sweet young thing, so can I.
What? Oh, you mean that proposal incident? I heard the soggy princess shot him down right away. Was pretty harsh about it, too.
Sure, but at least he had the balls to try.
Or the desperation. Hans rolled his eyes. He's still a bachelor about to hit his 40s. He should have known he stood no chance with someone like her.
That's just it, though. If he was actually desperate for companionship, he would go for one of the old maids around town. Instead, he aimed for the unapproachable beauty who stalks the night like a fleeting dream. So they tell me.
The woman they were talking about was a gorgeous young thing with flawless porcelain skin and bright red ruby-like eyes that arrived in town about a month ago. She clearly wasn't human, given her pigmentation and ear shape, but that wasn't enough to dissuade potential suitors. The cold glares and her tendency to sneer and turn her nose up at people was another story entirely. The rumors of her castrating a guy for trying to get too grabby with her also. The rumors of her castrating a guy for trying to get too grabby with her also added to her unapproachable atmosphere.
You know what? I think I'll give this waitress to Dory, actually.
Unapproachable atmosphere.
Say what you will, but Alex's courage hasn't waned at all, Kurt added.
Yeah, not when it comes to women at least. He's still useless in a fight. And there goes my mood. Way to go, Hans. Sorry, didn't mean to. Alex, Kurt, and Hans were a trio of war buddies, veteran foot soldiers that retired from service after the Empire lost to the Republic last year. One could argue that, even if they were getting on in years, the men could still be of use to the Imperial Army. Their bodies were fit and their wits sharp, both honed through many years of fighting against monsters, bandits, and soldiers alike. However, war was a filthy, horrible endeavor that chipped away at one's psyche and the horrific things. War was a filthy, horrible endeavor that chipped away at one's psyche, and the horrific things these three saw during the Calamity conflict finally proved too much. The Empire had no need for soldiers who had lost the will to fight, as they were liabilities on the battlefield. The three were discharged from service with a lump sum of gold to serve as their pension, though money did little to help them sleep better at night. That was what the booze was for. So Kurt and Hans were quite happy when Bernadette... That was what the booze was for. So Kurt and Hans were quite happy when Bernadette brought them their drinks and snacks. Granted, it wasn't easy for ex-soldiers with levels in the high 60s to get drunk, but that was why the owner always made sure to reserve some dwarven liquor for them. It was a bit on the expensive side, but some things were more important than money, like good company, crude jokes, and saucy gossip, which these two started sharing once the ice-imbued liquor started flowing.
That soggy princess, though, think she's one of them Nosferatu folks?
Hans asked at some point.
Nah, no way,
Kurt said dismissively.
But she only goes out at night and has those pointy ears and everything. Plus, this town isn't all that far from the Alliance border. Those guys are all ugly as sin, though. It's like they're not even human. Well, no, they're not. They're Nosferatu. You know what I mean? They look like a hobgoblin's ballsack. You'd know a lot about those, wouldn't you, Kurt? All right, I'll be Alex. By the way, I need to take some notes here. Let's see. I will stop sharing for a second. Okay, so Cade, Bernadette, Hans. Did we meet anybody else? Oh yeah, I'll go ahead and cast me. Snack, and who else have we encountered? I'm going to be Alex, and what is that? What was the, there's a character, the Duke? Hold on a second. I wish I could bookmark with this PDF, but I can't. All right, what page are we on? 58. Cardinal Zeke. All right. There we go. Goblin's ballsack. You'd know a lot about those, wouldn't you, Kurt? A third voice chimed in. Who in the... Oh, hey, Alex! The missing member of the unofficial Veterans Club had just arrived, joining his two mates as they shared a light chuckle at Kurt's expense. Unlike the other two with their short black hair, Alex was a shaggy, unkempt redhead. He was also the meanest looking of the bunch, with a lean face that was more than a little rough around the edges. He was also the meanest looking of the bunch, with a lean face that was more than a little rough around the edges. He hadn't bothered shaving in a while, giving him a scruffy-looking stubble that further set him apart from his clean-chinned companions. He hadn't bothered shaving in a while, giving him a scruffy-looking stubble that further set him apart from his clean-chinned companions. His outfit consisted of a white undershirt, a brown tunic, and a mostly spotless black apron, which was what he wore whenever he tended the bar. He was on break right now, so he came over to see how his friends were doing.
Might I ask what you two idiots were talking about that led you to monster tentacles? Might I ask what you two idiots were talking about that led you to monster testicles?
Just wondering what the new girl's deal is, Hans said, munching on some jerky. I figure she's a Nosferatu, but Mr. Ball Expert here claims she's too pretty for that.
Oh, you mean Cade?
If that's the soggy princess, then yes. Incidentally, the girl had been given that slightly embarrassing nickname due to the three publicly known... Incidentally, the girl had been given that slightly embarrassing nickname due to the three publicly known facts. She was beautiful, a member of the Wet Bandits, and she frequently used those shower-in-a-bottle things.
Talk some sense into this guy, Kurt.
Talk some sense into this guy, Alex, Kurt butted in. He's only heard about them Nosferatu, so he has no idea.
You're both right, actually, the bearded ginger revealed. She is a Nosferatu. Just an unusually gorgeous one.
Oh, aren't we technically at war with those guys?
Come on, Kurt. You know better than to equate governments with the people under them. She's still figuring out her place in the world and was treated harshly in her homeland. She just might decide the Empire's a better place to live.
You sure seem to know a lot about her, Hans noted. How come? I'm like doing all these vastly different voices for each character. It doesn't matter. They're not my characters.
Ah, that's because of the guild she joined. Those Wet Bandit fellas? They didn't have a level 50 ranger instructor on hand, so they had me advance her job. Showed me her appraisal results and some background info she provided.
They technically weren't supposed to do that, but they owed Alex for the favor, and the Nosferatu didn't seem to mind. So you had a bit of a one-on-one FaceTime with her, huh? I'd probably fancy her too if I was in your shoes, Kurt commented. How you handling the whole rejection thing?
Not too bad. I kind of expected it, to be honest.
Truthfully speaking, Alex had an inkling about the Nosferatu people's warped sense of beauty. Though human standards painted her as someone way out of his league, it should have been the opposite from Cade's point of view, so he thought he stood a chance. In retrospect, jumping straight to a marriage proposal was stupid. So he deserved all those mean comments she made about his various body odors.
There's hope yet, though. I think she's warmed up to me since then. Just last week I got her to giggle at a terrible bear pun.
Well, good for you, man. I hope that works out.
Thanks, Hans. Well, good for you, man. I hope that works out. Thanks, Hans. I don't know. She seems like a high-maintenance girl, Kurt grumbled. The inn lady said she bathed so much she practically installed a water heater in her room. As if I care about that. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I run a pretty successful bar here. Alex wasn't always a soldier. He actually used to work for his family-run tavern business when he was young, so he knew a thing or two about serving customers. It was the only trade he knew besides living by the bow, so he bought this place with his retirement stipend, refurbished it, and had been doing rather well for himself since. The fact that this place was close to full every single night was testament enough to that. I still say Bernadette would make a much better wife, the other man insisted. She's not as pretty as a princess, but did you see those white hips? Her strict attitude is the best, too. I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I seriously need you to stop harassing her, even if it's a joke. I'm quite serious. That's even worse. Look, I need to hire more waitresses, but your ongoing stupidity is giving this place a bad reputation. It's a small town, and people talk. Bad publicity is terrible for employee retention. Oh, look at you. When did you become such an a businessman? Kurt, I think you should slow it down with the drinking, Hans said, grabbing the alcohol-filled cup out of his hands. You don't want to cause problems for Alex after all the trouble he went through to get this place up and running, right? No, I suppose not, he slurred in response. By the way, Alex, have you tried asking this Cade girl to work for you? Even if it's only once in a while, it should be a good excuse to spend time with her. I haven't really thought about that. I doubt she'd agree, but I suppose it's worth a shot. Actually, I think I'll go ask her right now. It was around this time she usually got ready to leave on quests, so it was as good a chance as any. Good luck. I'll make sure Kurt doesn't go overboard. Thanks again, Hans. I owe you one. Alex threw off his apron and told the rest of his staff he'd be stepping out for a bit. He was the boss, so doing this sort of thing once in a while was no big deal. He walked out of the Happy Fox and into the pleasant spring. He walked out of the Happy Fox and into the pleasant spring evening. The sun had already set, but the sky still carried some light. There was also a refreshing breeze completely devoid of any sort of wintry chill. The man walked briskly down the street towards the inn he knew Cade was staying at. On the way, he realized him knowing so much about a girl technically only 6 years old was kind of creepy. But that was only if... No. It can't be. Okay, I got to do some effects here. Stepping out for a bit. He was the boss, so doing this sort of thing once in a while was no big deal. He walked out of the Happy Fox and into the pleasant spring evening. The sun had already set, but the sky still carried some light. There was also a refreshing breeze completely devoid of any sort of wintry chill. The man walked briskly down the street towards the inn he knew Cade was staying at. On the way, he realized him knowing so much about a girl technically only 6 years old was kind of creepy. But that was only if... No. No.
I'm gonna try this part again. But that was only if... Okay. My hair's not completely dry, but I gotta tie it up because it's so distracting when I narrate. Ugh. There we go.
Was kind of creepy. On the way, he realized him knowing so much about a girl technically only 6 years old was kind of creepy.
But that was... Oh, god damn it. Wrong track.
On the way, he realized him knowing so much about a girl technically only 6 years old was kind of creepy. But that was only if...
There we go. That's the kind of trail off we
It's
went.
only if... No. It can't be. The man's confident stride and train of thought came to a screeching halt. His entire body froze, his hair stood on end, cold sweat began to pour out of his face and palms, and his heart beat so fast one would think it was trying to chant a "get me the fuck out of here" spell. Forget moving, the man could barely even breathe. Yet, when those yellow eyes swung his way, his instincts as an army scout took command of his body and hid him in a nearby alley before he could be seen. The man's chest heaved rapidly, his stealth skill putting in some serious overtime to mask the sound of his heavy breathing while his mind struggled to process what his eyes had told him. Did he really just see that? He definitely did. Or at least he thought he did. Part of him hoped dearly that was just a hallucination, as even going crazy would be preferable to meeting that monster again. He was so paralyzed by fear that he couldn't even do a double take to confirm the situation. For better or worse, he didn't need to. The exceedingly tall, heavily cloaked stranger that sent him into this panic attack casually strode past the alley he was in without so much as glancing his way. Alex could do nothing but watch as the source of his nightmares ever since the war strode idly by as if he owned the place. Worst of all, none of the other pedestrians, though there weren't many, paid this mass murderer any heed. Alex's confusion was so severe that if Kurt saw his face he'd probably say something outrageous like, "You look like you've seen a banshee with a heart on." So, when he finally noticed Cade was walking side by side with that psychopath, he blanked out completely. Next thing he knew, it was 2 hours later, and he was kneeling in a ditch a dozen kilometers north of town. He had used his ranger job to track the towering terror that was the Sandman to this area. Hunter's mark came in especially handy, as it was a skill that could be used silently and stealthily to track a target over long distances. He wasn't sure why he'd done any of that, but he was dead certain he'd never forgive that man for what he'd done. The reason Alex and his 2 squad mates retired from the Imperial Army was not due to combat fatigue. That was probably part of it, but it was a singular event that ultimately broke their spirit. The 3 of them were part of the 8th Imperial Expeditionary Force, the vanguard supposed to secure the route. The 3 of them were part of the 8th Imperial The three of them were part of the 8th Imperial Expeditionary Force, the vanguard supposed to secure the route to Fort Yimin ahead of the main army. They were the same people that were ambushed by the Third Republic Legion's forces under the leadership of Milo Fahorn. The Empire's side suffered heavy losses in both manpower and supplies while inflicting almost none in return before the Elven forces retreated. That wasn't what broke Alex and his friends. Underhanded strategies like those were the only natural response the elves could make when they were being invaded by a superior Underhanded strategies like those were the only natural response the elves could make. Underhanded strategies like those were the only natural response the elves could make when they were being invaded by a superior military force. The fact that the Republic was able to pull that off despite the Imperials being wary of an ambush was simply a testament to their prowess when using such tactics. However, what happened later that night was completely removed from strategies or tactics, for it was the first time the vigilante known as the Sandman appeared in the war. Massacre was the only way to describe what transpired. Even if the damage this stranger inflicted upon the Empire's forces was relatively minor in the grand scheme, it was impossible for Alex to think of the casualties as just a statistic. He had seen men and women who were like family get slaughtered for seemingly no reason other than they were there. The horrors he witnessed as his comrades were torn limb from limb by that incarnation of terror and his evil minions had traumatized him deeply. His psyche was so scarred that his hands would shake uncontrollably whenever he gripped a bow, making him incapable of shooting with any degree of accuracy. He also suffered constant night terrors for several months after and still had nightmares on occasion. Focusing on his new pub and that pretty stranger had allowed him to take his mind off things lately, but any progress he'd made towards a full recovery was instantly lost. Yet, here he was, chasing after the very thing that caused him and his comrades so much suffering. It was definitely idiotic, but he couldn't merely walk away. Indeed, looking down at his hands, he realized that they were perfectly still for the first time in almost a year. Putting his palm over his chest to feel his heartbeat, he confirmed that he was no longer scared, merely excited. In other words, while his mind hid in fear, his body had moved on its own. Gripping his fist and gritting his teeth, he peeked out of his hiding spot. His target had separated from Cade almost immediately after they left town, and he followed him here, to the outskirts of an unremarkable patch of trees too small to be called a forest. Alex had seen Sandman disappear down a hole at the base of some great oak. That was about 40 minutes ago, and the mercenary had been inside since, according to his hunter's mark.
These characters are like in their 40s, I think.
His hunter's mark. Figuring he had located some sort of hideout or lair, Alex began considering what to do with this information. Should he enlist Hans and Kurt? Those guys had just as many grievances with that psychopath. And he was absolutely certain they would lend him their strength. The three knew full well this Sandman was no warrior or soldier, just a sick bastard that used war as an excuse to satiate his bloodlust. Letting such a man roam free on their home soil would only lead to tragedy. The problem was that 3 old war dogs could not stand up to such a proficient killer. While they were no pushovers, their abilities were painfully average for someone of their level. Realistically, they stood no chance against Sandman. But Alex knew someone that did. A man named Sigmund Law, who had recently become the new hero of the Hammer and subsequently claimed the title of Grand Inquisitor. The former soldier did not know this man personally, but he had heard tales of his exploits. According to them, Law was a hardliner who accepted no compromise when it came to bringing evildoers to justice, even if it meant making enemies of the nobility or other elements within the church. And this Sandman? He was as evil as a bastard could get, and no amount of political maneuvering or shady dealings would save him from the new hero of the Hammer. Of course, whether the Grand Inquisitor would even answer his plea was debatable, but the odds were good. Rumors said the man recently adopted 3 little girls, and that he was firm but kind when administering his duties. He put the well-being of humanity above all else, exalting the righteous and pure of spirit while punishing the guilty. Surely a man of such noble qualities would not stand for a war criminal to walk free within the Empire, doing goddess knows what to its innocent citizens. It wasn't clear how Cade fit into all of this, since Alex didn't think of her as a bad person, just a troubled kid from a different culture. Was she being tricked or manipulated? Or was her true nature aligned with that evil bastard's? Regardless, it was probably best not to approach her with this idea. As for how Alex would get his message to the hero, he remembered he had some old war buddies that signed up with the Inquisition. They were men and women that had witnessed the same, probably who would, actually. Who had? They were men and women who had witnessed the same horrors as him, Hans and Kurt, yet kept fighting the good fight. Those people were undoubtedly stronger than the 3 of them. And would not hesitate to get their superiors to act. It still wasn't clear whether they'd arrive fast enough to catch the Sandman, or if they would come at all, but it was Alex's best hope. So he slowly but surely slithered away from that living nightmare's hiding spot and slinked off back to town. Whatever was about to happen, time was of the essence, and Alexander Thorpe was Whatever was about to happen, time was of the essence, and Alexander Thorpe was someone who would make the most of it. Right now, the only tools at his discretion were his feet, his wits, and a burning desire to avenge his fallen comrades. Once that nightmare was dead and buried, he'd be able to fully devote himself to running the friendliest neighborhood pub in the province. It was a happy thought, which was quite fortunate, since it turned out to be his last. Splorch!
I love that. I love how he just builds and builds and builds a character just to immediately fucking kill them. It's one of my favorite things. He's the king of bait and switch.
Splorch! An invisible blade. An invisible blade made out of ethereal ice pierced into his skull from above with a disgusting sound, painlessly freeing his tortured soul from his body. The murder weapon was removed, and the gaping head wound was webbed up before the body hit the ground. Wouldn't want all that nutritious blood and mushy brain bits to escape. Soul from his body. Painlessly freeing his tortured soul from his body. The murder weapon was removed, and the gaping head wound was webbed up before the body hit the ground.
Master, I cut some dinner for you.
Drea eagerly reported as she webbed up the corpse for transport. Is it fresh?
Yep, looks like a good one too.
Good. Bring it to me. Good. Bring it to me. The stalker was quite pleased with herself. This particular specimen had some reasonably well-developed muscles, probably an adventurer or something. He was sure to be tasty, even if a bit on the skinny side. She even waited until he had calmed down before she claimed his life. Boxxy claimed a human's taste would deteriorate if they struggled before they died, so she did everything she could to score some points with the man-eating monster. This was important to the arachnid demon. Since she felt she was falling behind the others when it came to currying their master's favor. Zira had helped deliver the Allrana that was... Zira had helped deliver the Allrana that was now acting as dungeon master, and Cora was doing her best collecting shinies from the Atlas of Dreams. Ambrosia had her nectar, and Fizzy had, well, herself. The only thing Drea could do to earn Boxxy's approval was secure fresh human meat, so she did the best job she could. In reality, she was subconsciously ignoring another, far more meaningful contribution. The Golem Artificer had recently finished the weaving machine she had been working on ever since they moved to Azurvale. The Golem Artificer had recently finished the weaving machine she had been working on ever since they moved to Azurvale. The room-sized contraption could produce high-quality demon silk from the special spider thread that Drea made from all her... The room-sized contraption could produce high-quality demon silk from the special spider thread that Drea made from all her food intake. The rare material was both useful and expensive, so Boxxy was glad to have it. It was thanks to the arachnid assassin that the shapeshifter was able to have a new prismatic cloak made so soon after the last one. It was thanks to the arachnid assassin that the shapeshifter was able to have a new prismatic cloak made so soon after the last one was ripped up. Drea was glad to have been of service, though she wished the silk weaver wasn't so profoundly embarrassing to use. The spinnerets that produced the valuable webbing were located in her butt, so it looked like she was pooping whenever she was trapped. The spinnerets that produced the valuable webbing were located in her butt, so it looked like she was pooping whenever she was strapped in. The webstalker wanted to die every time she thought about it, so she did everything she could to keep her mind off it. In other words, she dedicated herself to doing everything she could to keep her master's secret safe while finding plenty of tasty treats to share with it.
Oh, this one does look good.
Judging from the way said master happily devoured the freshly slaughtered corpse was a...
Oh, this one does look good.
Here we go. Judging from the way said... Judging from the way said master happily devoured the freshly slaughtered corpse with a delighted burp, she had done splendidly.
That was good timing, too, Boxxy continued. I was just about to head back.
The hole in the tree the shapeshifter was inhabiting was actually a node in its dungeon network, which had established as The hole in the tree the shapeshifter was inhabiting was actually a node in its dungeon network, which it had established across Attica to help facilitate fast travel to certain areas of importance. This one would only stay here temporarily since it didn't have much use for it besides quickly checking in on Cade's progress. It technically didn't have to, since the ring it bestowed her gave Mortimer the ability to spy on her all he wanted, but it felt it was important to make sure she was taking her audition seriously. Once that was over with, it would reclaim the dungeon core and plant it somewhere else. However, that was not the primary reason it came here this time around. It was just dropping in after completing an unrelated endeavor in this part of the world. The shapeshifter used Nexus access to fling itself all the way over... The shapeshifter used Nexus access to fling itself all the way over to Republic territory. More specifically, to the bottom of the wind-carved ravine that was home to Bitterhold. It left the not-so-creatively named Bitterhole mini-dungeon and started climbing upwards as a It left the not-so-creatively named Bitterhole mini-dungeon. It left the not-so-creatively named Bitterhole mini-dungeon and started climbing upwards as a spider chest. Stain's guards, or more precisely, the guards that were Stain, greeted it with a simultaneous wave as the monster made its way over to the warden's office. It made sure to switch back to its Sandman disguise, just in case they were... It made sure to switch back to its Sandman disguise, just in case there were any unexpected visitors. Thankfully, this didn't seem to be the case, so it could easily enter the Overmind Slime's private quarters. Okay. Mind Slime's private quarters. Alright, so do we have Lori? Yep, okay.
Well, back so soon,
she exclaimed with an obscene tongue movement.
I was not expecting you for another few days.
I have my ways. What matters is that I got more of that stuff you wanted.
I don't know why, but my jaw is not feeling very good.
What matters...
Boxxy took out a large burlap sack from its storage and handed it over. The sentient pile of pink goo eagerly accepted and opened it, revealing its contents were... The sentient pile of pink goo eagerly accepted and opened it, revealing its contents were countless tiny pieces of blue, purple, and red crystals. She dropped a goopy hand into the coarse and sparkling sand as if to sample it. Okay, so I didn't quite comprehend what it was saying when it was revealing his location. Okay, I get it now. Okay, we'll reduce that down. Copy. And we'll go over here. They're in Bitterhold prison.
She dropped a goopy hand into the coarse and sparkling sand as if to say,
Oh, how wonderful. With this, I'll have enough to last me a year.
The material was a mostly useless mineral called almerite. Boxxy didn't know much about it, other than what it looked like and that Stain needed lots of it, which was why it had Mortimer's protege check on the huge deposit it found in Nosferatu territory. It wasn't sure whether the strange crystals would be harmful, but once she had confirmed them safe, the shapeshifter wasted no time in employing some aggressive excavation methods. The inherently curious creature couldn't help but ask, though it was careful not to piss off its new business partner.
"May I inquire why you asked me to be on the lookout for that stuff?"
Oh, it just makes for an amazing additive to hilt wine. Toxic to most living things, but absolutely delicious to me.
In truth, this mineral also greatly accelerated the recovery rate of Stain's lost or damaged slime cores, but that was her little secret.
"Could have had those Foundation guys do it for you if it was of such importance."
I'd rather not ask those people any favors. At least the stuff you want as payment is simple to deliver.
Boxxy's reward for delivering the first patch of powdered mystery quartz was the knowledge of how to obtain an ultimate skill as a monster. According to Stain, it still required 100 levels, just from two or more According to Stain, it still required 100 levels, just from two or more sequential... According to Stain, it still required 100 levels, but from two or more sequential jobs. For instance, the pink puddle was a level 50 slime and level 50 queen slime, for a total of 100 levels as a slime-based monster. So, if Boxxy got level 50 doppelganger to go along with its level 50 mimic, it would have 100 flesh shifter levels and would likely earn itself an ultimate skill. That was still a long way off, as the doppelganger job was seriously dragging its feet once it pushed past level 40. The last 10 levels would take a long while, but it wasn't in a particular hurry. At least, not since that Edward matter was settled.
"Are you going to pay up or what?"
the shapeshifter insisted.
Of course, Stain said. I've already prepared your reward. It's waiting for you outside this office.
"Good. By the way, is he supposed to be doing that?"
Sandman pointed towards the naked, bald man covered in slime in the corner, the individual that had once been the Gilded Hand operative called Hook. His wide eyes darted all over the place, and he seemed to be trying to scream, but the transparent pink goo covering him silenced his voice and kept him from flailing around too much.
Don't mind him. He's just really stubborn, so I had to intensify his treatment. I'll definitely break him, though. Eventually.
I see. I'll be going now. Goodbye, Warden Stain.
Goodbye. Feel free to drop in if you have more of the good stuff.
We'll see. We'll see.
When Boxxy left the office, it was greeted with a small pile of white rocks. More specifically, 5 kilograms of unrefined mithril fresh from the mines. It wasn't particularly shiny, but Fizzy needed this stuff for her projects. She'd taken up the blacksmith job and was currently tackling... She'd taken up the blacksmith job and was currently tackling mithril processing with some human golem maker. She'd taken up the blacksmith job and was currently She'd taken up the blacksmith job and was currently tackling mithril processing with some human... She'd taken up the blacksmith job and was currently tackling mithril processing with some human golem maker she met in Gun Tarim, the Dwarven Kingdom's capital. Luckily, the shapeshifter had another Nexus access node nearby, so it could go visit his partner whenever it wanted. Luckily, the shapeshifter had another Nexus access code nearby, so it could go visit its partner whenever it wanted, which, incidentally, was right now. It wasted no time pocketing its earnings and leaving Bitterhold behind. As the massive, cloaked figure of the Sandman departed, an elven prisoner kept a close eye on its back. The man abruptly dropped the load he was pretending to carry around and went to the warden's quarters. He opened the door, only to find her draining 6 bottles of elven liquor into her goopy head at once, giving the appearance of the booziest crown in existence. It was a strangely fitting symbol of power for the world's goopiest sovereign.
Ugh, I really wish you'd learn to knock, the slime groaned.
How is he here? That's interesting.
My apologies, but I got a bit worked up, the elf said. I just thought I saw a familiar face, so to speak. Was that Boxxy T. Morningwood?
Oh, yeah. That was its real name, wasn't it?
So it's actually working for the Foundation?
Yep. Even has a code name. Agent Sandbox or something.
Unbelievable. I never thought that thing was capable of cooperating with its killers. Then again, I suppose I should have expected this.
There was a reason the old saying, "If you can't beat 'em, join 'em," was coined by a doppelganger, which, incidentally, was this elf's true identity. Beneath those striped rags was an old, sour, and experienced ganger that used to be... Beneath those striped rags was an old, sour, and experienced ganger that used to go by many names, such as Reginald Nommel. Beneath those striped rags was an old, sour, and experienced ganger that used to go by many names, such as Reginald Nommel, Reggie, or Project Lighthouse. He currently had an agreement with Stain to hide him from the Foundation, though the slime had no idea she was harboring someone plotting on bringing down her employer. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Reggie wasn't about to complain, so long as she maintained her end of the bargain.
I'm surprised you know that exceptional specimen,
Stain commented.
You shouldn't be. Though I would prefer it not find out that I'm here. Things might get ugly.
Worry not. I don't have a reason to spill a secret. Not for free, anyway.
Reggie could respect that. Though he was under the influence back then, he had worked with Stain before, so he knew she was not one to back out of a deal without a very good reason. His main concern was what Boxxy would do if it found out he was here, as there was a chance that youngling would sell him out to its new bosses. At the very least, Reggie had something of a contingency plan, though it was only to be used as a last resort. After all, there was no telling how Boxxy would react if he revealed that the Foundation already knew the true identity of the Hero of Chaos. Would it rebel against them and try to eliminate them first because it felt threatened? Maybe it would hide itself away and start its charade over from scratch. It might just let bygones be bygones and maintain the status quo. That would be the best-case scenario for all parties involved, but given that thing's track record, it was just as likely to unleash a calamity upon Azurevale for shits and giggles. In the end, neither Reggie nor the Foundation knew what would happen if this information were to leak out, which was why both parties had elected to keep quiet. However, unlike a bunch of elves with too much power, a doppelganger would not hesitate to roll that chest-shaped die should push come to shove. All right. So let's see here. I'm at page 68. I have to see how long this chapter is because I might need to switch sets. No, I don't need to. I think this will fit in this set. I think this will be less than 20 minutes long. Okay. All right, guys. Be right back. I'm going to use the bathroom.
I've been narrating pretty dangerously lately. Last 2 days, no socks. No socks. Just letting you guys know. Sometimes I do, sometimes I just like to live dangerous. That's all. Sometimes I like to test myself. See if I still have it, It's like if you can't narrate without socks on, you kind of gone soft, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't use effects that often. It depends on what's going on. Like, for instance, Fizzy, right? Like, when I used to do her voice, and Dory's still going to have this as well. There's, like, this chorus, this effect that we use to make her sound more robotic, just kind of a thing that you can't do with your voice. Or dragons, or, like, different crazy huge monstrous creatures that there's no way you could really get the effect that you want with just your voice. But yeah, I mean, also to counteract that though, sort of a as sort of a something I have to admit, most of the time I do wear socks while I narrate, which some people actually consider cheating. I can understand that. It's not the most hardcore way to narrate with socks on rather than off, but you gotta make concessions sometimes and watch out for your health. Whoops, wait a minute. Okay. All right, back to... Oh, what happened? Share screen. All right, let's see if I can fit this one more chapter, this one more part into this Ableton set. So one thing about using this program is the more data you have in here, the slower playback and editing is. So I try to keep the length of the set down to 240 minutes. It's about that 240-minute mark where the slowdown is actually noticeable. So we keep these as small as we can. Or we let them be as big as we can, so that our proofers or polishers or whatever don't have to open a new file too often, right? Because that's just an interruption of workflow. But we also want the set to perform well, or else that's just wasting time too. All right, here goes. A tale of problems and solutions. Fizzy's right hand clasped tightly around the slim hammer's handle as she raised it overhead. Her left firmly held a piece of red-hot metal between her fingers. She carefully positioned the plate against the pitch-black anvil underneath it.
She carefully positioned the plate against the pitch-black anvil underneath and, for lack of a better term, took aim. The golem steadied her feet, sharpened her focus, and swung her tool down while trying to use just the right amount of force. Clang! Metal clashed against metal, sending a deluge of sparks in every direction. They bounced harmlessly off her impeccable mithril hide before spilling onto the floor and disappearing. The rectangular plate deformed unnaturally as the hammer strike sent ripples through it. Its wider sides arched upwards seemingly all on their own, causing the half-molten shard to adopt a smooth quarter-pipe shape. Fizzy carefully lifted it up, thoroughly inspecting it, then held it up to her side so her teacher could have a look as well. All right, who is this guy? Malcolm Giro. A human. Okay, so who was... Okay, so there's a... This is a character that shows up in Scaft. I think he was already cast as someone else. So let me check that out. Let's see. Try to find this info. Project info, casting. Here we go. Ah, God damn it. Empty. Okay, I might have to just check the chat. Here it is. All right, it's Justin. Oops. Where'd it go? Fuck. I forgot to check direction for him. Fuck. Chat. I doubt Justin will be on this one before he's on Scaft, but just in case. Human mechanic. Doesn't say anything about age. Let's see.
Okay. Well, I got it. All right, there we go. And I think, is Justin 3? Yeah.
I think you used too much force again, the man said. The man said, adjusting his spectacles. Better quench it for 40 seconds, just in case. The golem nodded and lowered the metal fragment into the... The golem nodded and lowered the metal fragment into the reddish, murky fluid of a nearby metal vat. The liquid sizzled, bubbled, and even slightly caught fire as it tried desperately to soothe the metal's heat. After precisely 40 seconds, the rookie blacksmith lifted the newly forged component out of the liquid. The mithril shard's red glow had all but disappeared, leaving behind a pure white, radiant glimmer that gave off copious amounts of steam. This lasted until the liquid clinging to it completely evaporated in a few seconds, at which point it heated right back up again with the same intense red light as before. Yeah, see the warping here? The tutor pointed out a flaw. The surface is uneven and wavy. Just a tiny bit too much force. This was Malcolm Giro, a human artisan who lived and worked in Guntarum, the Horkensaft Kingdom's capital. He was a blacksmith, enchanter, and the man responsible for... He was a blacksmith, enchanter, and the man responsible for fixing Fizzy's left arm after the previous hero of the hammer broke it off. He had short, scruffy, chestnut-colored hair and pale green eyes hidden behind round spectacles. He looked more or less the same as he did back when the golem first met him, especially the way... He looked more or less the same as he did back when the He looked more or less the same as he did back when the He looked more or less the same as he did back when the He looked more or less the same as he did back when the golem first met him, especially the way his face made it seem like he hadn't slept in days. His clothing consisted of old wool work clothes, primarily brown and dark green in color, which covered every part of him aside from his head.
Damn! I could have sworn I did it right this time,
Fizzy grumbled.
Oh, no, you definitely did it right, the man reassured her. Just because it has a minor flaw doesn't mean it's no good.
Pure mithril was a quirky material that seemed to act of its own volition during the forging process, so tiny defects were unavoidable unless one were a master.
Yes, it does. It has to be perfect.
Malcolm mostly used his craft to make weapons, armor, and the occasional golem patch job, so he could be forgiven for not understanding Fizzy's need for precision. An artificer's craft was a delicate and accurate art, so even the tiniest flaw could prove disastrous. That went double for arclight artificers, whose creations were more prone to malfunctions than the automata or flamespitter specializations of the job.
Don't be so hard on yourself, Malcolm said with a soft smile. Frankly, the fact you can already handle pure mithril to this degree is incredible. Most apprentice blacksmiths need at least 5 or 6 years before they're skilled enough to even think about working with the stuff. Yet you made it this far in just over a month.
Please, I'm no stranger to working the forge. Been relying on component forging ever since I could swing a hammer.
Just because one didn't have the blacksmith job didn't prevent them from hitting heated lumps of metal with a hammer.
Oh, duh. Get rid of that.
However, it was necessary if one hoped to keep up with the demands. Of high-level adventurers and artisans. Blacksmiths, enchanters, alchemists, and artificers all needed one... Blacksmiths, enchanters, alchemists, and artificers all needed one another in varying degrees to further their craft. The only truly independent artisan-type job was gatherer, though they were more focused on procuring raw materials than shaping them into something new. Fizzy's Arclight Artificer job had reached a stage where it was nigh impossible to make meaningful progress without officially taking up smithing. It was something she'd been meaning to do ever since she abandoned her flesh, but she didn't get the opportunity to fully devote herself to her craft until after Edward was a blood smear. Her combat-oriented jobs had stagnated somewhat since she wasn't fighting as much, but she had still become a level 23 blacksmith in record time. This rapid progress was made possible by 2 factors: the golem's aforementioned familiarity with the forge and her innate ability to talk to metals via metallopathy. This trait allowed her to negotiate with mithril in a way that would otherwise be impossible without the magical metallurgy skill obtained by reaching level 40 blacksmith. She could potentially use geomagnetic grip to forcefully bend the metal into a certain shape, but the result was neither precise nor sturdy enough for her growing needs. High-level artificer inventions demanded parts of a suitably high quality, which in turn required rare and expensive materials be handled with careful and experienced hands. Now that she had chosen to become a blacksmith, Fizzy was able to handle assembling her gadgets and inventions from a much earlier stage. The equipment maintenance and leathercraft skills she got from her new job were not all that useful, but forge control and basic metallurgy were another story. She could now smelt ingots by herself or make her own non-magical alloys instead of relying on someone else to get things just right. The job also had the side effect of providing her with a bunch of strength and endurance. Though relatively mediocre in terms of quantity, these additional attributes were quite potent when applied to the body of a mithril dynamo golem.
To be honest, I can't help but feel a bit jealous, Malcolm admitted while scratching his cheek. I'm just glad you're not delving into the smithing business for real. Otherwise, not only me, but even the dwarven smiths in town would be out of a job.
It's only natural to feel inferior,
Fizzy replied.
I'll admit you're skilled, but there's no way a meatbag like you could compete with someone as insanely talented and stunningly shiny as me. Fizzy? I'm pretty sure he was looking for sympathy.
Plus butted in.
I mean, look at him. I think he's about to rip his hair out in frustration. Or cry. Possibly both. That's his own fault for being weak-willed and feeble-bodied.
Minus argued.
Besides, it's not like Fizzy said anything untrue. I guess. Girls, do you mind? I need to focus.
The parallel entities quieted, allowing the dynamo golem to concentrate on the next step. She raised her special hammer in the air and began gauging where to strike the heated mithril plate between her fingers. Bang, 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 bang. Bang, 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 bang. Unfortunately, she didn't get to make that swing before a loud banging on the metal door behind her ruined her concentration. Bang, 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 bang. All right, let's go ahead and do a forge. There we go. She lowered her tool and looked towards Malcolm, who was adjusting his glasses with a displeased look on his face. "How rude!" he exclaimed as he walked towards the door. "Don't they see the occupied sign outside?" Though the human had a forge at his workshop, it was not hot enough to work mithril. That was why he and his pupil came to this communal. That was why he and his pupil had come to this communal foundry. Anyone with enough gold could rent one of the facility's advanced forge rooms, and none who did wanted to be disturbed. It was common courtesy not to bother artisans working their craft, be they smiths or something else. Malcolm was quite justified in being ticked off at this insistent visitor. The man unlocked the door and pulled it open just enough to show his face through the gap. On the other side was a well-dressed gnomish woman with pink hair tied up in a bun and a folder of some kind in her hands. She had 4 dwarves with her, all wearing thick-looking armor and mean-looking expressions. They did an excellent job of deflating Malcolm's ire, and he instantly transitioned from pissed off to apologetic.
Yes? Can I help you?
Good day, sir,
The gnome said politely.
Forgive the intrusion, but I was told this was where I could find one Fizzy Rustblood.
The man heard a bunch of clicking and buzzing noises from behind, but he didn't want to appear rude. But he didn't want to appear rude to these fine gentlemen with large beards and larger axes by turning his gaze away.
Is there such an individual here?
What if there is?
Then I would very much like to speak with them.
Wrong color. There we go. One moment. Okay, so more for Lori. Okay, I need to find out her name first.
Malcolm looked over his shoulder to call over the gnome-looking construct, but his words got stuck in his throat. Barely a moment later, the door was opened inwards by some unseen force, knocking him to the side. The 4 dwarven bodyguards went on high alert at the sight of the slightly irate, heavily armored, and highly charged mithril golem on the other side. They stood their ground and clenched their weapons, ready to react should the construct make any sudden moves.
What is it, meatbags? What is it, meatbag?
Fizzy said, coldly, her metallic voice grating against the ear.
And it better be important. Greetings, Miss Rustblood,
The other woman replied. After recomposing herself.
I have an urgent summons for you.
She held out a beige envelope. She held out a beige envelope stamped with some sort of F-shaped seal. Fizzy stepped forward, snagged it out of her hand, and immediately ripped it open. She only needed to look over the documents for a few moments before she realized what this was about.
My neighbor's truck is running right outside. I think. Nope, it was my washing machine.
I'm being sued for patent infringement? I'm being sued for patent infringement?
Man, that thing is really vibrating hard.
Her shriek of disbelief was accompanied with a few loud snaps of lightning that leaped between her circular head ornaments. She held out a beige envelope stamped with some sort of F-shaped seal. Fizzy stepped forward, snagged it out of her hand, and immediately ripped it open. She only needed to look over the documents for a few moments before she realized what this was about.
Quite so. The Weaverton 5000 schematic you submitted to the Department of Patent Regulation in relation to patent number 624C was found to use proprietary technology belonging to my client. As a direct result...
Ka-chank! Fizzy's right wrist opened up and her built-in plasma cannon popped out of her forearm.
God damn. That vibration is driving me nuts, but it's probably not translating into the audio.
Fizzy's right wrist opened up. Fizzy's right wrist opened up.
Where'd it go?
Fizzy's right wrist opened up and her built-in plasma cannon popped out of her forearm, aimed squarely at the gnomish woman's head. Ka-chank! Fizzy's right wrist opened up and her built-in plasma cannon popped out of her forearm, aimed squarely at the gnomish woman's head.
I will only tell you once. Leave. Come now, there is no reason we can't be civilized.
Bolts of lightning began to dance across Fizzy's chassis and leapt between the two large round coils attached to her head.
Three.
Ma'am?
One of the dwarves asked, clearly waiting for direction.
What do we do?
2. Now you see here, ruffian, I will not be...
Pachoo!
A blue bolt of pseudoplasma shot out of Fizzy's arm and flew right past the other party's head, singeing her pink hair bun, silencing her complaints and melting a hole through the wall in the back. Singeing her pink hair bun, silencing her complaints and melting a hole through the wall in the back. His head, singeing her pink hair bun, silencing her complaints and melting a hole through the wall in the back. Okay, I think I can... I don't know if we're gonna get her name.
One. You'll pay for this, psycho!
The stubborn woman finally got the message and practically ran out screaming with her useless escorts in close pursuit.
You'll pay for this, psycho! Ah!
The stubborn woman finally got the message and practically ran out screaming with her useless escorts in close pursuit. Satisfied with that outcome, Fizzy put away the weapon and closed the door. Malcolm just sort of stared at the whole thing in utter bewilderment without thinking to get his ass off the filthy floor. Malcolm just sort of stared at the whole thing in utter bewilderment without thinking to get his ass off the filthy floor. It took him a few moments before he realized the sudden ordeal was all over and what it was. It took him a few moments before he realized the sudden ordeal was all over and that it was probably safe to speak up.
Well, I suppose that's one way to get rid of a lawyer.
Yeah, there's a much better way, though,
Fizzy replied absent-mindedly.
Oh? What's that?
Not missing.
The human forced a laugh at what he presumed was a bad joke, but his mechanized pupil's unflinching expression suggested she was completely serious.
Mind if I ask what's all this about?
He asked, gesturing in the heavy-duty golem's general direction.
What?
Where did all that armor come from?
Oh, right. You've never seen me like this. Give me 2 seconds.
Fizzy put the documents she was mulling over on the nearby table and assumed a neutral standing position. Her body was enveloped by a web of electrical arcs, followed by her armor splitting apart like a puzzle. It folded in and rearranged itself, causing the golem to rapidly shrink. A few moments later, a second flash of lightning ran down her frame, sealing the vast majority of gaps and seams between her new skin to form large plates of smooth, shiny mithril. The golem's overall appearance had shifted from an armored juggernaut to something more akin to a normal person wearing a mithril suit. There was no doubt as to her mechanical nature, since the gaps between her metal plates and joints showed hints of her inner workings. All of the heavy and bulky armor had seemingly disappeared, and her shield had shrunk to a bracelet-like accessory. All of the heavy and bulky armor had seemingly disappeared, and her shield had shrunk to a bracelet-like accessory on her left arm. Her limbs and figure were far more elegant and slender, with a modest bust. Her limbs and figure were far more elegant and slender, with a modest bust, narrow waist, and wide hips that gave her a distinctly feminine and conventionally appealing shape. This sensual shift also affected the two spherical coils. On her head, which now resembled rigid twin tails that nearly went down to her shoulders and occasionally let out puffs of steam from their sides. On the whole, this form seemed to have been based on Fizzy's memories of her meatbag self, but only loosely. While it definitely resembled the gnome she used to be, it was far more womanly. Her waist was never anywhere that thin, her legs were definitely longer, and her rear bumper was unquestionably rounder and fuller than the originals. Not that she'd complain. As for all that padding and plating she took off, the golem wasn't entirely sure where it went. Best as she could figure, her ticking core absorbed it and deposited it into some storage-like space. Best as she could figure, her ticking core absorbed it and deposited it into some storage-like space. There was no way to know for sure. This vital component, which served both as her heart and brain, was so far beyond its own comprehension that she had completely given up trying to decipher its mysteries.
Better?
She asked, with a 60,000 GP smile. Yes, much. I'm sorry, no, but what? Since when can you do that sort of thing?
It's just a golem skill, don't worry about it.
More specifically, it was the ability that Fizzy originally wanted at level 10 War Golem, but her circumstances at that time forced her to pass it over for the Lightning Warp skill. Bah. Looks like this will not be under 20 minutes. Physical Augmentation Module. Acquisition of one self-configuration module intended for rapid switching between specialized combat and support roles. Requirements: Level 10 War Golem, Level 25 Artificer. Type: Active. Activation time: 2 seconds. Cost: 300 MP. Range: Self. Effects: Permanently transforms the user into a different form upon activation. Grants access to a new transformation at level 1, 4, 7, and 10 of this skill. That conundrum was from over 6 months ago. Fizzy's part in the Gilded Hand subjugation had pushed her past level 15 of the job, which allowed her to finally pick up the PAM. Since then, she had been using it regularly, allowing her to raise it up to level 7 and unlock 3 additional transformations on top of her original Skirmisher mode. The one she was using right now was Service mode.
She was readily apparent. As was readily apparent, it was a lighter, nimbler, and more compact version of herself. As was readily apparent, it was a lighter, nimbler, and more compact version of herself. In exchange, her body couldn't exert as much strength. Its armor was much thinner, and some skills, like her Magitech cannon, could not be used. Though Fizzy couldn't know for certain, it seemed fairly obvious this service mode was intended to facilitate the needs of her artificer job. The form overhauled her joints and hinges so they were more suited for precise and delicate movement rather than absorbing heavy impacts. Her wrists were especially flexible, able to spin a full 360 degrees with ease. Service mode also added a magnification function to her eyes, making it easier to keep track of her handiwork. Of course, the same could be achieved with some specially designed goggles, but having that as a built-in feature was tremendously convenient. It was also pretty freaking cool, according to Plus. The second transformation, which she attained at level 4 of the skill, was something called Charger Mode. This was a purely combat-oriented configuration that excelled at running into things at high speed and turning them into dust and pieces. This was a purely combat-oriented configuration that excelled at running into things at high speed and turning them into dust and pieces, though its freakishly large arms and fists were rather slow and difficult to control. Level 7 of the module granted her access to Fortress Mode, which somewhat limited her mobility but made her armor much thicker. It also replaced her static field skill with an ability that projected a defensive barrier around the golem and any nearby allies so long as she kept it charged with lots of MP. Fizzy didn't know what to expect from the final form, nor when she would obtain it, but she was looking forward to it.
Don't worry about it, she says.
Malcolm rubbed his head.
So what if I'm a golem maker, you know? Why would I care if the highly advanced pure mithril construct that arrived on my doorstep can also transform and has electrical powers? It's not like it concerns my life's work or my area of expertise or anything.
The man's disbelief was rather understandable, considering this was the first time he'd seen anything other than service Fizzy. He understood she had ranked up since their last meeting and assumed that that was what she looked like now. He understood. Where did that go? Where did it go? He understood she had ranked up since their last meeting and assumed that that was what she looked like now. Why wouldn't he? Machines that transformed to that absurd degree were the stuff of outlandish fiction and needlessly complicated children's toys. Hearing his complaints made the golem sympathize with him a little. She imagined she'd be similarly peeved if Malcolm had some fantastical device that revolutionized her understanding of mechano-magical engineering. She imagined she'd be similarly peeved if Malcolm had some fantastical device that revolutionized her understanding of mechano-magical engineering.
Sorry, service mode's already a habit. I wasn't trying to hide it. I just tend to stay like this whenever I'm not in the field.
The lightweight form was easier to move around in and made her seem less like a monster and more like a person. Both were vital when trying to fit in with meatbag society in order to take advantage of their goods and services. Incidentally, whenever she asked Boxxy what its favorite configuration was, it said it liked them all because they were all fizzy. She really didn't know what to make of that statement, so she merely chalked it up to shapeshifter sensibilities and took it as a compliment.
Anyway, I'm going to have to cut today's session short.
The golem moved to pack up her tools and materials.
I really need to go deal with this patent infringement thing.
Patent infringement? The man repeated. Wait, that's what you're getting sued for?
Generally speaking, patents were something only artificers had to worry about, but Malcolm had lived in Guntarum. But Malcolm had lived in Guntarum long enough to know the gist.
Guntarum?
But Malcolm had lived in Guntarum long enough to know the gist.
There has to be some mistake. I mean, I can't see someone as serious about their craft as you resorting to stealing ideas.
Oh, I didn't. And it's no mistake. They're trying to claim my work as their own, the bastards.
Who is they?
Clan Fizzlesprocket.
Malcolm took this revelation surprisingly well. Frankly speaking, learning one of the most influential families in Guntarum was up to no good was the least surprising thing he'd heard all year. Thing he'd heard all year.
I see. Well, good luck with that.
I don't need luck. I have a goddess of gambling on my side.
Fizzy put on the backpack containing her stuff and left the forge, leaving Malcolm to deal with the repair bill for the hole she made with her earlier warning shot. She would pay him back later, but right now she needed to move fast. As expected of her father's former clan, the Fizzlesprockets did not waste time and had set the date for the hearing in a mere 3 days. They argued that the demon silk weaving machine Fizzy made could not function without their exclusive power distribution circuits, which meant they were entitled to shared ownership. Which meant they were entitled to shared ownership of the patent at the least. Fizzy would not let them have that without a fight. That was her creation, damn it. The only reason she submitted a patent for it was so the artificer community would know of her genius, yet those leeches were trying to claim it as their own. This unquestionably dickish move was nothing new, of course. Fizzy had heard plenty of stories where one of the Big Three used their influence and power to pressure independent tinkerers into submission, all for the sake of making a profit off of their work. The 3-day deadline was part of their strategy. Giving the other side as little time as possible to prepare for a trial was an effective move. After all, a case cobbled together over a few days would surely seem flaky when placed against one that had been in the making for weeks, possibly months. The Fizzlesprockets probably would have waited until minutes before the trial to serve... Fizzy those papers if it didn't go against the very laws they were trying to abuse. One thing was clear. No matter how much prep work that pink-haired snake put into this, she and her client clearly had no idea who they were messing with. When the day of the hearing came, both parties gathered inside the municipal tribunal building. It was a place for settling civil disputes such as patent infringement, and, though it did have seats for witnesses and observers, it was usually mostly empty. This wasn't the present case, as the tiered benches inside the auditorium were nearly full. Roughly 200 people had gathered on the stands and were buzzing with anticipation as if this was some form of entertainment. This turnout clearly did not please the Fizzlesprocket representative, the same woman who delivered the subpoena. Her pink-haired bun still hadn't recovered from Fizzy's warning shot, so she was forced to style it in a pixie cut. To her right was the raised podium where the judge presiding over this case would sit once the proceedings got underway. To her left was another long desk, identical to hers, where the defendant and her legal counsel were seated. These 3 pieces of stone-hewn furniture were arranged in an equilateral triangle and all faced the center, where a circular stand for witnesses was located. The trial got underway when the judge, a dwarf named Agok Evanward, arrived and took his seat. The gnome representing the influential clan introduced herself as Lumi Fizzlesprocket and presented her side's case. They claimed that Fizzy had created a new invention with the intent to earn money off it either by selling it as is or through its operation. Otherwise, she wouldn't have acquired the patent. They weren't entirely wrong, as Boxxy was going to make a killing off the Weaverton 5000 trademark. The defense wouldn't even fight this point. The Golem side was going to focus on contesting the claim that her machine relied heavily on Fizzlesprocket proprietary technology in order to function. Unless that claim was disproven, then the gnomes would win. Unless that claim was disproven, then the gnomes would win and gain the ability to legally mass-produce and sell the machine without its actual creator's knowledge or approval. They could also demand compensation from Fizzy to cover any damages. The Golem doubted their actual aim had anything to do with money. She thought it far more likely they just wanted to obtain the rights to use her original designs and ideas that were part of the schematic to further their own projects. This motive was part of a long-running scheme to control the flow of technology and information, which the Fizzlesprocket household deemed would be of vital importance in the decades and centuries to come. Fizzy was not keen to let them have their way, so she sent out her legal counsel to carry out her defense. The man in question was an elf from the Ishigar Republic. The man in question was an elf from the Ishigar Republic Embassy. The man in question was an elf from the Ishigar Republic Embassy named Hamon Farkian, and he was representing a citizen of his home nation. The blue-haired elf in the sharp suit knew his way around the Horkensaft Kingdom's laws, so he and his client were able to prepare a surprisingly solid defense, despite the sudden deadline. Okay, so I got a name for her.
My side.
Fizzy, surprisingly solid defense, despite the sudden deadline.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's so crazy how so many different titles are out there that get people to follow us. Psycho World, the 3rd book is coming out early next year, I think. We'll see. January or February. I hope you enjoy it. We didn't get good enough sales on it to like keep doing sound effects and music. We didn't do a whole lot in the first book, but hopefully that doesn't detract too much from your enjoyment of it. Okay.
The sudden deadline. Hamon started by conceding that the power source the machine used was based on a similar principle to the plaintiff's. Engraving a special conductive fluid into metal plating to produce power-amplifying circuits was something of a staple. Engraving a special conductive fluid into metal plating to produce power-amplifying circuits was something of a staple of Fizzlesprocket-made contraptions. However, the initial concept was owned by Ekaterina. However, the initial concept was owned by Ekaterina Dragunova, the original artificer, and was therefore public domain since she was deceased with no heirs. Henceforth, any technology developed with that idea at its core was fair game. Since Fizzy's version used a completely different carving pattern and alchemical solution, it should be considered different enough to be its own separate design. Lumi immediately countered by claiming that was not the case and called forth an expert from the Department of Patent Regulation to the stand.
The witness claimed they found the component schematic submitted by Fizzy Rustblood to be a derivative of Fizzlesprocket-owned intellectual property. The patent in question, bearing the serial number 506D, was one of the influential family... The patent in question, bearing the serial number 506D, was one the influential family had acquired very recently. The defendant did not own the rights to use or build upon said intellectual property, so House Fizzlesprocket was justified in seeking its due, namely, a hefty fine and legal ownership of Fizzy's new patent. It was the defense's turn to question the witness. Fizzy's attorney asked the DPR official about the illegally appropriated technology more in depth. It became evident that the design was sent to the department through a courier by a gnomish artificer in the Lodrak Empire. The man in question was Rory Fizzlesprocket. He had submitted it as an independent entity since he had been disowned and exiled by the head family, and it was indeed approved by the DPR. However, since the man and all his descendants were presumed dead, the Fizzlesprocket household claimed ownership of the orphaned design. They'd been trying to get their hands on it for months, but the paperwork hadn't made it through the kingdom's convoluted bureaucratic pipeline until a week ago. Fizzy let out a breathless, tired sigh. She had a feeling it would come to this, and though she was loath to do so, she saw no other options. She signaled her representative to bring out the big guns, prompting him to reveal that his client was actually Corny Fizzlesprocket, the rightful heir of said patent. The crowd grew quite noisy, and the judge slammed down his gavel, demanding silence. He'd always wanted to do that, but never got the chance due to the generally boring nature of patent trials. He had a feeling today would be anything but ordinary. The Rustblood juggernaut always attracted a crowd, and she never failed to get them heated up. Having restored order, the judge directed the elven attorney to present evidence of his claim. Which he did, and copious amounts of it at that. Strictly speaking, it was inevitable that Fizzy's meatbag origins would one day be put into question, considering it was an outlandish tale. Thus, she had all the necessary paperwork to prove who she used to be prepared ages ago, with a little help from Kira's FIB friends. Since the Horkensaft kingdom placed great importance on one's lineage, it was only natural she'd have them close at hand. To corroborate her backstory. She even backed it up herself while under Teresa's oath. The tribunal's scribes confirmed there was no change in the her faith attribute before and after her testimony, meaning that she was indeed telling the truth. Admittedly, not the whole truth, but more than enough to prove her point. Faced with such overwhelming evidence, the court had no choice but to accept Fizzy as the last living descendant of Rory Fizzlesprocket. Extremely unlikely circumstances aside, the law was quite clear. The patent belonged to her, so Fizzlesprocket's claims were flawed from the start. The elven attorney named Hamon even bit back, demanding the plant. The elven attorney named Hamon even bit back, demanding the plaintiffs be stripped of their ownership of her father's patent, as it was appropriated using false or incomplete information. The other attorney did not skip a beat and immediately shifted the point in a completely different direction. She put forth that the defendant testified she had been renamed by a scribe after her permanent transformation into a metal construct. So, at one point in time, she had been a golem that bore the Fizzlesprocket name before it was illegally removed. In other words, Lumi was claiming that Fizzy was actually an item that rightfully belonged to her client's household along with any and all property in her possession, intellectual or otherwise.
At this point, the trial turned into a mudslinging match. Questions regarding traditions, laws, technicalities, ethics, and all sorts of other gray areas were thrown about. Even Fizzy's involvement with the vault beneath the mountain and her part in Even Fizzy's involvement with the vault beneath the mountain and her part in reconnecting the kingdom with the Even Fizzy's involvement with the vault beneath the mountain and her part in reconnecting the kingdom with the estranged moon gnomes were brought up. Even Fizzy's involvement with the vault beneath the mountain and her part in reconnecting the kingdom with the estranged moon gnomes were brought up. At one point, about 4 hours into the trial, the Radiant Paladin's faith and acquaintances were coming under attack. The golem decided to draw the line and take matters into her own hands. The golem decided to draw the line and take matters into her own hands.
Objection, Your Honor!
The debate came to a screeching halt upon Fizzy raising her hand and shouting loudly. Her lawyer looked at her with a face of, "What the fuck are you doing?" but she paid him no mind. To his credit, Mr. Hamon Farkian was very good at his job, but his opponent was a gnome with a natural talent for burying solid arguments under inane, legal-sounding drivel and technobabble. It was unfortunate, but it would appear he was unable to seal the deal, and Fizzy had better things to do. And Fizzy had better things to do than entertain this farce.
And what is it you might be objecting to, Miss Rustblood?
What is the judge's name? Agok. I had Will play as judge in The Stars Have Eyes as well.
The judge replied in a surprisingly calm voice considering the headache he was getting from these two snakes hissing at each other. The judge replied in a surprisingly calm voice considering the headache he was getting from those two snakes hissing at each other.
To this ridiculous debate! See, from what I understand, the trial hinges on whether the court decides that I'm legally an item or a person. And the reason Your Honor cannot decide is because this tribunal has never seen such a case.
Indeed. That is more or less where we are at, Miss Rustblood.
That was the core of the dwarven judge's problem. There was no judicial precedent, meaning that it was highly likely this case would create one. Whether he ruled in favor of Rustblood or Fizzlesprocket, his decision would surely shape future laws and trials that involved enlightened minds trapped within monsters' bodies. Knowing the judicial system as well as he did, he could easily see this seemingly inconsequential patent infringement lawsuit being used as an example in both civil and criminal law disputes. Some might say he was overthinking things, but the judge nevertheless refused to pass a verdict unless he was 100% certain of his answer.
Then I wish the court to consider the following question. The golem rose from her seat and stood on top of the stone desk in front of her. She activated her physical augmentation module, causing her slender frame to rapidly increase in size, mass, and height as it gave way to skirmisher mode. Once the transformation was finished, she was so heavy that the solid stone piece of furniture she was standing on threatened to crack and buckle under the tread of her heels. Damn it. Once the transformation was finished, she was so heavy that the solid stone piece of furniture she was standing on threatened to crack and buckle under the tread of her heels.
I fucking love Fizzy. Fizzy's fucking hilarious. Okay, so forge all the way through here. Then go with courtroom ambience.
If this item decides to slaughter every last meat bag in this room, then who is going to be responsible for its actions? She stomped down with her right leg, breaking the straining desk and reducing it to a pile of rubble with a loud crash. This naturally caused a bout of panicked screaming, and guards were no doubt on their way to subdue the disturbance. But she just smiled brightly at the dwarven judge and pair of lawyers. Hypothetically speaking, of course, the golem added. She switched back to her previous configuration, sat back down in her seat, and crossed her legs as if nothing had happened. Armed men and women of various vocations began pouring into the courtroom, but the judge was quick to tell them to stand down, keep watch, and be quiet. He turned towards the pale-faced gnomish prosecutor, who had ducked behind her own desk during the commotion.
Well, Miss Fizzlesprocket, any further objections as to Miss Rustblood's claims to full and sole ownership of patents number 624C and 506D?
The pink-haired woman's head shook frantically since her words were stuck in her throat. She hid it well, but having her face nearly melted off 3 days ago had been a profoundly jarring experience. Combined with Fizzy's hypothetical threat, she was more than convinced some things were more important than a stupid patent or two, like her head and pulse, not to mention her ability to breathe. Also, her ongoing existence. She was fond of all of those.
Very good.
The judge nodded.
In that case, I declare Miss Rustblood the sole rightful owner of patents number 624C, 506D, as well as any other intellectual property submitted to the DPR by Rory Fizzlesprocket following his relocation to the Lodrak Empire. The plaintiff is also hereby sentenced to hand over any schematics, prototypes, and or inventions based on any such patents to Fizzy Rustblood. Failure to do so within 10 business days, will result in a 3,000 GP fine with another 1,000 for every 5 additional days of non-compliance.
Fizzy raised her hands in the air as if she'd just won a round in the local Coliseum's monster fighting circuit, but the dwarven judge wasn't quite finished yet.
As for you, Miss Rustblood, while I can respect your passion, I am significantly less appreciative of your destruction of tribunal property. I hereby find you guilty of contempt of court and sentence you pay a fine of 2,500 GP on top of any property damage inflicted. Failure to do so within 10 business days will result in your imprisonment for a duration of up to 200 days. Court is now adjourned.
Bang, bang, bang. The judge slammed his gavel 3 times to signify the end of the trial. Fizzy was significantly less elated after being put on the spot like that, but she nevertheless left the courtroom with her head. But she nevertheless left the courtroom with her head held high. The attorney, following closely behind, clearly wasn't as pleased with the outcome.
Are you nuts?
The man asked in a hushed voice.
No, I'm Fizzy.
I'm serious. You're lucky he let you off with just a fine. Do you have any idea how close you came to being branded an enemy of the state?
Fairly, yeah. However, I'd much rather be labeled a monster or a criminal than someone's property. Let me guess. Not unless it's Boxxy, right?
Minus sneered.
Well, at least it knows to treat us with respect, adoration, and... at least it knows to treat us with the respect, adoration, and attention we deserve.
Plus chimed in.
Damn it. No, what the fuck?
Plus chimed in.
You'll be singing a different tune once it finds out the bill we just racked up. It's gonna be pissed. It'll be fine. Fizzy just has to wiggle her bumper a few times and it'll forgive us in no time. We can't keep doing that. One day it'll stop working and then we'll be in deep shit. One day it'll stop working and then we'll be deep in the shit. If that's true, then we might as well make the most of it while we still got it. Ugh. Frankly speaking,
the golem continued while the parallels argued.
That ridiculous little pink meat bag should be thankful I didn't ram her head down her throat for all those disingenuous assertions, snide insinuations, and derogatory terms.
You know, that prideful attitude of yours just made you a very powerful enemy, right?
The elf retorted.
I don't give a rusty damn how high and mighty they think they are. If they try to come after me or my work again, whatever happens to them will be on their own heads.
True, the fizzle sprockets may have had friends in high places, but none were out of reach when it came to Fizzy's own acquaintances. True, the fizzle sprockets may have had friends in high places, but none were out of reach when it came to Fizzy's own acquaintances. In fact, the golem had to practically nag Boxxy into letting her handle this. In fact, the golem had to practically nag Boxxy into letting her handle this her own way. Otherwise, it was liable to take things into its own hands. Tentacles. Whatever. Point was, she couldn't care less if that clan mysteriously disappeared from the face of the planet, but she wouldn't be able to accomplish one of her personal goals if she did that. She aimed to prove to them and the rest of the world that she, as a single golem was superior to all of the Fizzle Sprocket household combined.
Ah,
The lawyer groaned a sigh.
I guess I should just stop complaining and be happy we won. Yes, you should. I just have one more niggle, if you don't mind me asking. Asking is free, I suppose. Did you have to break that table? Of course I did. How'd you figure? And please don't tell me it was because the Muffin Man inside your head told you so like last time. You see, Mr. Farkian, once you've been tossed about by the whimsical flows of chaos as much as I have, you begin to realize something. A sort of hidden nugget of truth about this world that all of Rick's faithful uncover sooner or later. Oh? And what's that? There is no such thing as a problem that cannot be solved with the right application of force.
It was the magnitude, direction, and mass behind said universal solution that the golem was still having trouble with. But she'd get the hang of it eventually. I loved that chapter. All right, saving this. Actually, let's do this. Save one more time. Undo. Now we'll start a new set. It is 1:20. We are... Let's see. I think I gotta stop, guys. Let's see, 10... 1:20, yeah. Yeah, I gotta be done with it for today, guys. So, thanks again for coming and hanging out. I got one more cold read happening tomorrow. That's gonna start between 10 and 10:30. And Central. So again, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you want to stay up to date with when this is happening. Check out our newsletter at soundbooththeater.com. Go pick up Neven Iliev's The Stars Have Eyes at soundbooththeater.com as well. Lots of independent stuff that's available on our platform. And that's also where Small Chests Are Fine too is going to debut. It's going to come out on our platform before any other place. I think we're going to put it on sale for $10, $9.99. So, and this thing's like going to be 16 or 17 hours long. So that's way cheaper. That's cheaper than a credit on Audible. So not only will you guys be getting the audiobook cheaper, but both Neven and I will be paid more per copy since it's going through our platform. So, yeah, guys, thanks again. One more time for coming to hang out. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself, and if you did, make sure to tell people about this stream. I'm back at it one more time tomorrow. That'll be my last cold read for this particular book. And, yeah, that's it. You guys have a fantastic day, and I'll hopefully see you tomorrow.